Hello, everyone. I've met some of you already. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jake. I'm a brewer at Athletic Brewing Company. Joining me tonight is our site director, Cody Rice. He's going to help me out. I'm down a hand, so kind of going to need a hand a little bit. We're going to be passing out some samples, but we're just going to do a big overview of non-alcoholic beer. It's kind of a little bit about a lot of things. So, very, very, very huge kind of umbrella. We're not going to go too in depth with anything, but I hope you guys can learn something. So, getting right into it, if I can get this to click right. Aha. Before I get into these definitions, I was going to ask if anyone hasn't never had NA beer before, but based on the triangle test, I'm assuming everyone has at this point. So that actually makes my life easier because when you're dealing with beer without alcohol, there is things that people need to be made aware of. It's not going to taste the same, it's not going to taste the same body, this and that, whatever. But so we'll just get right into it. Basically, NA beer, it seems like a really easy thing to talk about. It's just beer without alcohol, right? But it's really important to define. So it's pretty much beer. It contains less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. And it's going to be designated as a malt beverage, cereal beverage, or near beer. So pretty much all NA beer is a malt beverage, but not all malt beverages are NA beer. And a malt beverage is defined, I'll read this verbatim, a beverage made by the alcoholic fermentation of an infusion or decoction or a combination of both, potable brewing water of malted barley with hops or other parts, other products, and with without other malted cereals, and with or without the addition of all prepared cereals, other carbohydrates, or prepared products prepared therefrom, and with or without the addition of carbon dioxide, and with or without other wholesome products suitable for human food consumption. We're going to make a big emphasis on human food consumption. Please don't poison your products. Don't give us anything toxic. That's not good. Um, that's a lot of words, so we kind of want to break that down a little bit easier. It's pretty similar to regular beer. You really just need water, malt, potable water, not wastewater, potable water, malt, hops, and need active fermentation. So that means you don't necessarily need brewer's yeast. If you want to do a full lacto thing, that's fine. You just need to have that full fermentation going. And the final product has to be less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. And the reason that's important is because you can't just take some DME and stir it into a bottle of Perrier and add a dash of hop oil, call it NA beer. That's not what that is. That would be pretty gross, but that's not going to hit the requirements, right? You need to have that active fermentation. So NA beer is very much, it is traditional beer, and you got to have that less than 0.5%. So kind of, we're gonna be passing out some beers. Like I said, most of you have already tasted some beers that are non-alcoholic. The one we're gonna start with, this is our golden ale. Same kind of deal. Like if you ever had a relative or a friend trying to get them into the craft beer thing, maybe they're into the American light lager, whatever. You're gonna start them off with a blonde ale, something light. This is kind of the same deal with NA beer because it is separate flavor wise. This is the one that's going to be kind of the closest to what you're used to. It's kind of why we want to start with this. So I'll let Cody pass those out while he's doing that. We've kind of established what NA beer is, kind of what the guidelines are, the restrictions. Oh, I do want to point out, this is not strict. If you want to add fruit, you're good to add fruit. If you want to add broccoli, go for it. I don't know if I would recommend that, but you can add anything there in between, and it's all good. As long as you have the water malt hops in your active fermentation, and as long as you hit these guidelines, it's less than 0.5%, you're good. You can add anything else. But going into that, I kind of want to get into some common ways that we produce them. There's a few different ways we can go about it. The most common are simmering it off, vacuum distillation, filtration, and then arrested and limited fermentation. All of these, I'm not listing these in any particular order. All of these have pros, all of these have cons. I'm not saying one is better than the other or anything like that. Um, Again, all pros and cons, but I do want to kind of start with the simmer off method because that has been it's a really easy and common method. It's been used by brewers for a long time. People just, I mean, the technology is better now, but people would just boil the alcohol off and drink it. Nowadays, with like distillation methods and stuff, we know that your temperature should be about 173. You can hold that temp and just boil that alcohol off. There is some drawbacks. Um, it's going to cook the beer that high heat. Putting your beer back through that high heat is going to cook some of it, and you're also going to concentrate those flavors. In a perfect world, the alcohol would just evaporate and everything else would stay. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. It's what's called an azeotropic relationship. Water and alcohol are azeotropes, so as the ethanol evaporates, the water will start to evaporate. You're going to lose some volume from that. It's going to concentrate everything. So if you're going to do this, keep that in mind. Some people would like to add water back to make up that volume, reduce that concentration. Um, that's the biggest downside. It does have a huge plus side, which we'll get into later, in that it does kind of pasteurize the final product. So if you're going straight into your packaged product, your keg or whatever, you don't have to worry about microbial growth. It's kind of going to pasteurize it while you're pulling out your alcohol. So this is a very accessible option to brewers anywhere, whether it's professional brewers, home brewers. Very accessible, and you don't have to worry too much about the back end of sterilization. Again, we'll get into that in a little bit. But the next method kind of goes vacuum distillation. Don't stick your shot back into your carboy. It's not going to work. You could try, but same kind of process as distillation, but you're doing it under a vacuum. So anything you pull under a vacuum, it's going to boil at a lower temperature. Ethanol boils at about 173 degrees Fahrenheit. Under a vacuum, you're at 93 degrees. So you're going to greatly reduce that cooking factor. You're still going to get that azeotropic relationship. You're still going to get that concentration, but you're not going to get that aging cooking factor. The reason I'm kind of saying vacuum distillation, that is sort of the go-to. There's probably ways to do a vacuum evaporation. I don't know about that, but this is the standard method. And it's a great method to use, but it does typically require some sophisticated equipment. It's not available to everyone. It's more of a large brewery thing. A lot of the large NA breweries are doing this, and it makes good beers. But keep that in mind as you're looking through these processes that you want to do. It might not be accessible to you. This is a very this group of people knows a lot. So you guys might be able to figure it out. I don't know. The next method, filtration. So we're going on to the cold side mix. So alcohol is actually a larger molecule than water is. So you can actually filter out the alcohol. That's sort of how it's brought up in most literature. You're not actually filtering out the alcohol, you're actually filtering out the beer from the alcohol. So you're going to use a reverse osmosis membrane. Most of the time, you're going to want to use a cross-flow filter. And the reason you don't want to use a special filter, you can use your at-home RO, like water treatment filter. The problem is when you screw those pieces on, those are not airtight. You pull a ton of gel. So you could actually theoretically filter out the alcohol, but you're going to pull in a bunch of oxygen. It's not ideal for most beers. So you're going to want to use a special filter with that. But basically, as you run the beer through, the ethanol and the water gets pulled out. Your beer's pulled on the other side, the dump side. You can then either filter out the alcohol again, add water back, or add water into it to make up for that water loss. This is a very, very also common method of doing it. The only thing with this, it's cold side. You don't have to worry about cooking it, so it's a huge advantage. And this is also something that can be done at home. problem is you're going to strip the taste, the aroma of the body. No matter what, every time you filter something through, you're going to strip some of those compounds out. So it's an effective method if it's available. All of these methods have pros and cons. This is the con of this. Going cold side, you're not gonna cook it, but you're gonna strip some stuff out. The final commonly used method is the arrested limited fermentation. So this is a cool one. This is kind of a newer thing that's been going on. You can kind of control your fermentation, just how much alcohol output your yeast is putting out. There's several ways of doing that. You can just cold crash, hard crash your active fermentation and stop the fermentation. But there's also some yeast providers that are doing specialty yeasts that will target certain sugars, not other sugars, and that will actually kind of help with that process where it's not producing as much alcohol. The big con with this one is that, at least according to the yeast suppliers, you're going to want to change your recipe and mash profiles because you're going to have some attenuation stuff going on. So you got to keep that in mind. Positive thing though is you don't necessarily have to buy any equipment. You can buy these strands of yeast from Whyte down the street. Super easy method to do. Right there up next to the boil off, but this one is, again, it's cold side. You're not cooking your beer, everything. But so all of these things all have pros and cons. You know, it's going to be easier. It's going to be difficult. You're going to cook it or you're not. So it's really going to matter kind of where you're at, what your system is looking like, and you're going to have to make that call on your own. Going into food safety stuff. This is probably the biggest thing. Out of everything I'm talking about, this is the biggest part. This is something that brewers do not think about because we don't have to. You make an alcoholic product, and that alcohol protects us from infections, all kinds of infections. When you go into the NA world, you lose that protection. You lose that defense. So you may think you're the cleanest guy, the most sanitary guy, have your pH meter, double it up, triple it up. There's no reason to not mitigate that risk. And the risk, it's, standard infections from beer, which we'll get into, that can bring you over ABV in your finished product. That can blow up packages. And then you can also actually get actual harmful bacteria like food illnesses if you do not do this right. You're less than 0.5% alcohol, you can potentially contract foodborne illness from that. So don't do that. Kind of standard infections here, like everyone's probably aware of these. SAC. This sounds like a kind of a crazy thing to say that brewer's yeast is an infection, but if you didn't clean off, let's say, your oxygen wand right, and you go to your NA beer, you can infect it with cali yeast, and that cali yeast is going to bump your alcohol up, and then the beer's done. It might end up tasting great, but you didn't hit that NA spec. It's not NA beer at this point. Obviously, lacto, PDO, Brett, those are all great things to do when you want it to. It can cause out flavors, and the biggest thing there is going to be ABV spikes. Even after the fact, when your fermentation's done, you go to cold side, you get one of these regular infections that are not harmful to anyone. That can bring you up over that 0.5%. And if you're a diehard, you're not hitting that spec. So, I do think we have some sours to actually pass out, and you can do sours with NA beer. It turns out really good, I think. But again, you want to do these things on purpose, right? Just like regular beer, you don't want to attract these infections on accident. It's going to totally screw your beer up. You want to do these things on purpose. So you can do this is our blackberry Berliner Weiss. I think it turned out pretty good. Yeah, so you definitely want to make sure that your regular brewing stuff, cleanliness, sanitation is going on. We're gonna get more into that. We're gonna go double right, which brings me into the danger zone. We can get the regular beer infections. This is something that normal brewers never have to worry about. These infections cannot thrive in an environment over 3% alcohol by volume. You're never going to have to worry about these unless you're doing NA beer. So, that being said, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to put anyone off or anything like that. You do it right, it's fine. It's just like, you're not going to cut up some raw chicken and then throw some greens on there and cut it up right after that, right? You're going to cook right. But these are some of the normal kind of food infections. You get salmonella. Don't know about that. Listeria. There was a big infection up in Washington 2 weeks ago. You get botulism, toxoplasma, staph infection, coli. If you're going into brewing NA beer, you don't have the alcohol to fend these things off. So you have to keep that in mind. There's no, you don't want to cut corners. You don't want to take shortcuts. You want to go overboard on everything that you do. You don't want any of this. And not only do you not want any of this, you don't want to give this to your friend or your frail grandma. You know what I mean? It's better. 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 Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. No one wants botulism. No one wants staph. But yes, this is something that regular normal brewers, full beer, soul strength brewers don't have to worry about. If you're grinding an NA beer, you do have to worry about this, um, to a point. But there's a lot of ways to combat all these infections, which I'm sure most of you all know. A lot of this relates to normal brewing practices. Obviously, cleanliness and sanitation. That's huge. If you're not cleaning your stuff, you're gonna mess it up. Yeah, you're not sanitizing it. So when it comes to CIPing, this may not be the home brewer standard, but this is a standard for a lot of professional brewers. It's the 4 T's of CIP. It's time, temperature, titration, and turbulent flow. So time. Don't cut yourself. Don't try to cut your time short. You're already doing a 6-hour brew day. The extra 10 minutes is not going to hurt you. And typically you do a 30-minute classic, 20-minute acid. If you're not doing an acid cycle, I would recommend doing that. It's going to help with your stone, calcium deposits. It's also going to actually help chill my blood level as well. Temperature, acid going at 160 to 170. Acid's pretty good at 120. This is pretty important too. If you're not heating it up right, it'll still work. It's just not going to work as efficient. So why waste the time? Why waste the money? If you're not going to use it as efficient as possible. Right? And then titration. This is actually a big one. A lot of people don't titrate their chemicals. That's just ensuring your concentration. So look at what the chemical manufacturer recommended level is. It's a titration. You can probably get a beer supplies where it's super easy to use. You just put 5 to 10 mils in a beaker, use coloration standard, and then you just drop the opposite chemical in at 30 percentage. If you're going under the recommended concentration, you're not anyway. If you're going over, you're wasting time. So you might as well kind of hit that recommended level. You don't have to worry about it. But definitely, if you have to choose, go over and go under. If you go under, you're setting yourself up for a sketchy situation. Turbulent flow. This is another one that a lot of people know. Don't soak it. You want to flow about 7 feet per second. It's going to be a little bit harder depending on your vessel, but you should definitely look into at least a chugger pump. If you're having flow and motion, it's going to clean better than if it's just sitting there. If you have your carboy filled up, you're going to have air pockets. You're going to have bubbles. that's all spaces where bacteria can grow, microbes can grow. And then you just dump it out and you assume it's good. If you're doing that over and over and over, you're going to hit all those spots. You're going to hit all those places. And then, yeah, just at the bottom, yeah, if you don't have like a string thermometer that you can get in, or a titration kit, or a pump spray ball, not necessarily a spray ball, but you just got like a conical thing to hook up to your target pump. It's so much worth it. And all of this applies to standard brewing as well, not just anything. This is going to make all of your brewing better no matter what. This is a great kind of rule of thumb to go by, especially with any beer. Kind of brings us into the critical points which infection can occur. So obviously you need to clean everything. Cleanliness and sanitization, different. Cleanliness is getting the dirt off, sanitizing is getting the microbes off. So once you get all the dirt off, you can make sure all the microbes are dead. Some critical points are the heat exchange systems. So whether you're using oil or a plate frame, if you don't clean it properly, you don't sanitize it properly, that's a production point. Air and gas equipment, this is one thing that trips a lot of people up. The oxygen ones, not so much for the aeration, but carbonation. If you're going to carve up your keg and refrigerate it or start it, if there's bugs in that line, it's going to go into the beer. It's going to infect the beer. A lot of people don't realize that, so before you tap that keg, before you start first start, you're going to want to pull those lines out, make sure that they're sanitized properly, so that the gas going through is not going to hurt the bugs. Fermentation bright vessels, that's pretty much given. I think everyone who usually knows, your carbohydrates, your fermenters, secondaries, your tertiaries, those need to absolutely be cleaned in and sanitized. But that's probably the number one area of infection for all the issue with infection. There's no standard back for that. That's just you doing this for a long time. Fermentation bright vessels, that's typically what you consider fermented. So you want that trickle flow. You want that kind of back and forth. You want the time, you want the titration, you want the trickle flow. You want to make sure you're cleaning those vessels well. You don't want to cut corners. Yeast packaging and kitchen equipment. You get your little yeast pack, sample, wherever you want to get it from. That's covered in things. It's covered in microbes. You hit it with a knife, that's covered in microbes, and you're just putting it in. My recommendation is to, whatever kind of sanitizer you're using, whether it's Spartan or iodine or alcohol, whatever, put that package in that sanitization bucket. Make sure it's good. Put on some gloves. Definitely wash your hands, but put on some gloves. Treat it like you're working professional. Because that part of it is going to get infected very, very quickly. It's not a spot to skip it. And then packaging materials too. You know, your bottles could have a bug in there. Your cake can have a bug in there. Whatever you're gonna finish your beer off, what you're gonna put it into, if there's any bugs in there, it's gonna take over. Again, this goes back to there's no alcohol to kind of defend you against these infections. Even the standard infections, they're going to take over. If they're there, they're going to go. So you have to really go from first to last all the way through. If you're using heat, non sanitizer, spend the time, don't cut corners. Because best case scenario, doing infection, you have to dump the batch. That happens, right? Worst case scenario, you become mighty sick. It's really not something good like that. So, going all the way down to packaging, whether you bottle, can, whatever. You really want to have zero microbial activity. Zero. You don't want one cell, you don't want two cells, you don't want half a cell, you don't want half a blood cell, or half a zero. Really what you're going to want to do. pH control is a huge one. That is a given. You're going to have to do pH control no matter what. 4.5 hour beer, and then pasteurization and scale filtration. Those kind of go together. We'll talk about those as well. But again, maybe you don't get a major infection, but if your beer goes over 0.5%, it's not any beer. You're not hitting that specification. Whether or not that matters to you as a home brewer is up to you, but you can't accurately say, I made this, it's overspent. And then obviously if a major infection occurs, you can get someone sick. Yourself said, it's not anyone. If anyone's been down to Mexico and drink a glass of water, you probably have been there, done that. Not getting into details there. pH control. This is a good one. pH is important to all aspects of grain. There's two main rules. You got hot side and cold side. Hot side pH is for quality purposes. Cold side pH is for safety purposes. So your hot side pH, you mass pH, you want to hit that 5G mass pH, right? For all your hops, your grains, all that. Your boil pH, your knockout pH for your yeast, that's all going to affect your flavor. It's going to affect your hydration, all that stuff for your stuff. Once you're past fermentation, you're into that cold side of things, where you're going into your secondary, your drying, your packaging, everything like that, then it becomes a safety thing. At least with NA beer. With regular beer, you're golden. Whatever your pH is fine. With NA beer, if you're over 4.6, you can actually grow botulism in your package. My great grandpa used to tell me about people getting botulism. I haven't heard about that in my lifetime. That's not starting out. So all you got to do is pH control. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can do that with grain. You can do that with phosphoric acid. There's many ways to bring the pH down. But ultimately, you're going to want to have a good pH meter. If you don't have a good pH meter, you should get one. Even if you're not planning on brewing a beer, it's going to help you with your whole brewing process as a whole. And when you get one, make sure it's calibrated every time you use it. Maybe not every time you use it, but every day that you use it, make sure that it's calibrated right, the numbers are reading what it's supposed to be. That way you know you're going to be at a good spot. But this is a must. I should have capitalized the must. It has to be under 4.6 for non-alcoholic beer. Very specifically for non-alcoholic beer. Pasteurization, kill it with fire. Pasteurization is really the process. You're heating liquid to a micro-infilling temperature is over 140. That's going to be for a set amount of time. But you're going to want to cool it down. You don't want to get that cooking. You don't want to get that flavor degradation. So you're going to cool it down. The dairy industry kind of gives you the numbers up here: 145 for a half hour, 161 for 15, 191 for a second. What's cool about this is actually pretty easy to do on any scale. You could set up a 50-foot coil in your hot lid with a charger pump and send it through, and right out the back end. And as long as it's spending that 15 seconds at 161, you're pasteurizing the beer. As long as it's going into that final vessel. So this is a very kind of an easy method to do. You fill it up, you throw it in your kegerator, cool it down, you're good to go. But this is going to help kill any residual microbial activity that might pop up. You don't want to spend all this time making a beer, you get an infection, and then it pops up to 27%. Now you got to dump it because it's no longer in a beer, or worse yet, a bad infection. That's not good. So pasteurization is a pretty good way to go about it. A lot of professional brewers, big brewers do this. Regular beer, NA beer, this is a pretty common thing to do. And again, that bringing it up to temp and then cooling it down, that's going to be the key there. So you want to make sure you have that setup going. You don't want to leave it hot for too long, unless you're doing the simmer off method. But this is a good method for the other courtside stuff. And speaking of courtside, you can actually filter the beer to make it sterile. You don't have to pasteurize. If you don't want to cook it, you can keep it cold all the way through. A little bit more difficult to do, a little bit more specialized, but if you got any kind of filtration equipment, yeast about 3 to 8 micrograms, bacteria about 1 to 2 micrograms. If you get it under that half a microgram sterile filter, everything's filtered out. You can keep it cold all the way through. Don't have to worry about cooking it. But this is a cool thing. A lot of people like doing this. But again, you're gonna lose some of that that body, that aroma, that flavor to the membrane. There's nothing to go about that. You're not gonna lose volume so much, but you are gonna lose some of those compounds. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You can always compensate for that on the front end when you develop the recipes. On that point, listen, coffee beers. Antonio shows a wide range. You can do the light beers, you can do the sour beers, you can do the hoppy beers. This is all we have, but we do dark beers, we do medium beers, we do in between beers, all of it. I will point out this method, if you're going to go with the filtration method for stripping the alcohol, that will not sterilely filter the beer. That would be a two-step process, because as you run it through your RO membrane, the beer that you're collecting does not run through the membrane. You have to run through it. So the sterile filtration and the removing alcohol filtration is not the same step. Those are two independent steps. Pretty much does it for finished stuff. This is very, very basic, very easy. It's probably the most important thing though. No single process will guarantee safety against infection. Everything must be done together. Just because you clean your carboys, your fermenters right, doesn't mean you can skip the sterilization steps. Just because you pasteurize your beer does not mean you can skip the pH management. Everything has to be done together if you want it to be safe, if you want it to be good. Again, this goes back to, this is not normal beer. Normal beer has a huge range. If you wanna say it's 7%, you're good from about 6.7 to 7.3. If you do an NA beer, you have to be at 0.5. So if you come in at 0.3 and then it goes over to 0.57, you're done. It's no longer good. It's kind of a big part about that. So anything you think you might be able to cut, you do not. Do everything together. And this should be done for any one beer to brew. Don't skip any of your steps, but especially for any beer. There is that danger zone of bacteria that could potentially not. None of us want that. That was we looking to kind of start into it. If you're looking to just drink any beer, I'd say just go for it. Try what you want to try. Be able to try with us today. That was awesome. You guys would think that. Just go for it. But if you're looking into getting into any beer, there's some things to think about. What equipment do you have? Most convenient. If you don't have a filtration method, don't off the bat go for that. If you have an idea of how to do a vacuum distillation, cool. All the power to you. A lot of people don't. But maybe if the simmer-off is one thing you want to try it. If the specialized yeast or the fermentation stuff is more your thing, do it. If you have to figure that out, think about the recipes. If you're going to do your favorite 10% better IPA, you're going to try to simmer that off. The more alcohol that's in there, the longer you have to cook the beer, right? It can take a lot longer to burn off 10% than 5%. that's going to drastically change the flavor of the beer. That's something to think about. Even if you're going for a 5% beer, you're going to send it through the filtration system. It's going to strip some stuff. So even though it tastes really good for 5%, maybe it's going to be a little bit too thin. These are things you have to think of. Same thing with verifying ABV. A big part of this is making sure that we're getting specifications. So how are you going to verify that? A lot of people will send it to a lab, or if you got friends at a brewery, I worked with in the past that people come in and do stuff. Not only right now, but I've seen them in the past. So you can maybe do that, or you can rely on that specialized use of your gravity calculations that you must do. There's going to be a range there. But the calculations are not super accurate. So if you're coming in on your calculations at 0.49, you should probably err on the side of caution. If you're coming in at 0.2, you're probably good. That is supposed to be alright. And then the final product sterilization. How are you going to package your beer? I want to say right now, I do not recommend bottling for any beer at all, because how are you going to carbonate it? You should have zero microbial growth, which means your sugar tabs are going to be nothing for fermentation. And if you do have microbial growth, that's going to put your ABV over. So I would recommend getting away from bottling. I'd go with canning or kegging. Canning's a little bit more specialized, but get your kegerator. You can always do counter pressure bottling once you get it dialed in on the kegs. But that's something to think of. If you big bottling, maybe balance all the time. And then pasteurization, filtration, whether you want to risk it. pH is really the main thing you have to have. You don't have to pasteurize, you don't have to filter. Is it worth it though? For me, I pulled a piece of chicken off the grill and cut it open. It's been a little bit pink in the middle. I'm like, it's fine. I'm not eating it. And I've been fine. I wouldn't give that to my kids. So, gotta kind of take all of that into consideration if you're kind of looking to get into this. And I don't have another slide to bring it up, but this is kind of my personal experiences with everything. How NA beer is kind of impacted me. One of the big things, all of the stuff I'm talking to you guys about, it sounds like challenge after challenge after challenge. And how hard is it to do this? How much more attention you have to pay to that? As a brewer for me, that's a really cool thing. These challenges for me, this is why I do it. This is why I really enjoy it. It's hard to do. Making NA beer is harder than making traditional beer. Well, it's harder than making traditional beer to taste good. That's kind of the big thing there. So, think about this. Do you want to drink NA beer? Do you want to do NA beer? Up to you guys. With that, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. You guys got any questions? Hand one up right away. I can't talk about anything that we do at Athletic.
Remember to put your hand up and I'll walk around.
What are the other commercial brewers doing? Right? When we look at it, the other commercial brewers that are doing NA beers, what techniques do they use, and why? Is it because they have certain equipment, or is it because they can produce something they think is better, or what are they doing?
That's a great question. Pretty much everything that I said. The only one that most commercial brewers aren't using right now is the sunlight method. That a couple decades ago, that was the common thing to do. But the filtration, the vacuum distillation, and the fermentation stuff, that's pretty much what's popular these days. To go on your question, I can't talk about it. But we do use traditional brewing methods. We just have our own special way of doing it.
In the absence of alcohol, do hops offer much in the way of antimicrobial properties?
Yes and no. So hops do offer that antimicrobial, but that's going to be more so on the cold side. If you're not dry hopping properly and your stuff's not sanitized, you're still going to introduce bacteria. Those hops are not enough to kill that bacteria.
What techniques are available to limit the adverse effects of process methods that affect the aroma and flavor and body?
That it's kind of an umbrella question. Honestly, it's one of those brewer things where we're all a bunch of tinkerers. You're going to kind of have to find out what works for your system, what works for you. My personal experience, every brew house I've worked on works a little bit differently, so I can't necessarily say it seems to be a single method that's going to work better.
What about for filtration? You were saying that you can kind of compensate on the front end for the things that can be lost during filtration. So would that just basically be bumping up everything that goes into the beer?
Sure, yeah. So you're going to lose, that body, that flavor, that aroma. So what are you using for body? What are you using for flavor, aroma? Bump those up. You can bump up your caricals, you can bump up your dry hops, you can bump up your local hops, whatever you wanted to. If you know you're going to lose some of that out, just bump those up.
One more question. How is the NA beer market changing?
The NA beer market is rapidly growing. Rapidly. I don't have any statistics up here, but I just read a statistic. Cody may be able to verify this or not. Something like 80% of people who drink alcohol also drink non-alcoholic beverages. The market is moving up rapidly.
Yo, you got one more. Don't go anywhere too fast. So first a comment. I had a pretty successful raffle at this past year's shift, and I drank a lot of your beer. So I appreciate that donation. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I mean, a hot day, something a little bit more flavorful than water. Loved it. What is being done with all this alcohol that's being stripped off? Because when I have a batch that goes bad, I give it to friends of mine, and they maybe take that into moonshine. Where does all this alcohol go?
Excellent question. Good.
I don't know where we produce it and where it would go, but I do have friends that are brewing and distilling and do things, and they're fans of making canned cocktails and some sort to do that. What you or anyone else does, but it is nothing you can sell it.
So just like milk and eggs in a refrigerator that don't have alcohol in them, is there a shelf life for non-alcoholic beer?
Yes, there is. There's also a shelf life for regular alcoholic beer. As oxidation sets, and there's no way to completely strip oxygen from the product. So depending on your dissolved oxygen levels, that's going to determine your shelf life. If it's stored cold or stored warm, that's also going to determine it. So there's no shelf life per se. If everything's done right, there's no microbial growth, it's not going to make you sick, but the beer quality will turn just like a local beer.
Okay. And I had one other question. If you're doing the simmer-off method, how do you do your gravity calculation? So if you start with, let's say you have a 5% beer, so you have a 1050 to like a 1010 fermentation, and then you do simmer-off, how can you measure the gravity to know that you got to a 0.5% alcohol?
I would, honestly, I think the easiest would probably be to weigh it.
Yeah, so when you're introducing hops for dry hopping, how do you
put the hops in without introducing bacteria? Is there a method for that?
Well, obviously hops are naturally antimicrobial, so the hops we get should be sterilized, good to go, vacuum sealed, everything like that. The microbes are going to come from the outside of the material you're getting in and of itself. So just kind of making sure that everything is sterilized, that the packaging is sterilized, and a great method to make sure you don't get any microbes sucking in is to maintain positive pressure on your fermentation vessel. Same thing goes with regular beer. So if you have kind of CO2 coming in and burning out as you pour it in, that positive pressure is going to make sure the microbes blow out while your hops go in. Should be good to go.
Thank you.
You said that on the boil off method that your beer gets concentrated. Can you make a weaker beer and then get the same result?
Yeah, I would think so. So if I was gonna go with the simmer off method, let's say I was going for a red ale that I wanted really caramely and hoppy, and maybe it just kind of came out lackluster. That would be a perfect method to go and kind of, because you're gonna get those Maillard reactions, you're gonna get that caramelization going. So even though that might not be good for some styles, but to your point, you can kind of concentrate those lighter ABVs going up.
So, how do you end up doing like pilot batches? Are you able to do them with your process that you have at Athletic?
Yeah, we do a ton of pilot batches. Last year we did like 100 different pilots. We do have a smaller system, yeah.
So will Athletic here in San Diego ever have a tasting room or anything where you try a bunch of those experiments, or just in general?
As of right now, I don't know, but I hope so. Because I live up in North County and I work down in Miramar. I would love to have some kind of tasting room up here.
It'd be a good breather for all the other beer mar tours going on around the area as well.
Great question. So Whyte Labs, I don't know too much, but I do know that Whyte Labs has their MA All Day Grease, I believe it's called, and that is available in 5 packages. Yeah, sort of. I'm not an expert on it, but I do know that the yeast targets certain change of sugars, so it doesn't ferment certain other sugars. It doesn't ferment maltose. It's on their website. You can actually look it up. But it doesn't ferment maltose, so it kind of targets certain other sugars, which is why you have to be careful about production, because the sugars that you're taking away, anything else is going to chomp off right away.
Could you just mash like 170 degrees or something like that, so you have super long sugar chains, so they don't need those short sugar chains, or that way the yeast doesn't try to consume it? Is that a method?
I suppose it could be. I'm not sure what the exact specs of this yeast is, but yeah, probably.
So I've read some books and watched some documentaries on historical style low alcohol beers. Have you guys ever practiced with historical style monastic ales?
No.
Okay, I'm going to make one real quick observation. In the last 8 or 9 years or 7 years or whatever, I don't think we've ever had this many questions in a presentation. So I think that's a really good job. That's awesome. That's a positive thing, at least for me.
Thank you, everybody.